Thank you for making some time to speak to me today, Amy. It's always exciting to get a chance to hear more about, someone's backstory. And I like to start all these episodes just by getting to know, what you've kind of done along the way that's led you to where you are now. Because so many job seekers, and I feel like I've mentioned this in previous episodes, think that they're going to graduate and then end up in that dream job. But there's tons of stops along the way. So it'd be awesome to hear, about some of the stops you've made along the way to get you where you are today.
Yeah, I absolutely. So I love this topic because it's exactly what you're describing. I think people have an idea of what a career should look like, and it's usually very linear and very sort of planned. And while there's lots of room for planning in people's careers, there's just also so much happenstance and things happen in so many different ways. And I'm definitely one of those people who had a non-linear journey into their career. Um, and I'll be honest, because I definitely have like my educational background is quite colorful, so to speak. So when I'd love to tell you, I was like, oh, I went to Harvard and then went on to Yale, and it was sky's the limit. But I grew up in Vancouver, and when I graduated, I remember my mom graduated from high school. I remember my mom kind of saying, and my mom has a master's degree in education, and she was like, Amy, university is not for everyone. Like, don't worry if that's not something you're interested in. And I was a little offended that she that she said that. And I think she may have said that because I was never very strong academically in school. I didn't focus on my academics, and there were things I enjoyed, but I was just never really focused on achieving academically.
Yeah.
So I took some time off, and then I went to Langara, which is a college in the Vancouver area. And I took a lot of courses on like philosophy and creative writing and English literature. So I think back on that, and I think about the privilege that some people have to be able to dabble in their interests in a post-secondary environment. I think that's a luxury that may not many people are not enjoying, especially as we see so many different types of learners getting into post-secondary.
Big time.
Um, yeah, and then I transferred to the University of Victoria to take their undergrad and a Bachelor of Fine Arts in creative writing and professional writing because I love to write. It's something I still enjoy doing. And so I was studying like poetry and writing for screen and writing for stage. Um, and so I really try to, when I tell people that, I really try to not be self-deprecating and say like, oh, it's like basket weaving 101. But I absolutely loved it. I dropped out sort of close to the end of my degree because I was really having a hard time staying focused and committed academically.
Sure.
Um, and then I went back to school a few years later and I finished my undergrad through the University of Athabasca, studied governance law and management. And I got to take a lot of courses in employment law, human rights law, administrative law, the public sector, and things like that. So I've always been really interested in the public sector.
Totally different than the creative writing, though. What kind of led to that?
Um, I think I have growing up in my family, I think we had a sort of strong, maybe political feeling in my family. My sister went into politics, and she had a more linear path where did her undergrad in poli-sci. She now works in politics. And so I think there was just a lot in my family of like a lot of discussions about like the public life, education, healthcare, things like that.
Gotcha.
My mom worked in education, and so I think it's always been interesting to me. I think I'm not a person who gets very excited by business, but I do get really excited by community and politics, like local politics mostly. Um, and yeah, so I was kind of interested in possibly working in like the nonprofit sector or the public sector, maybe being in the public service. I had this like idealized vision of what working in the public service might be like. And I also knew there's a large aging population in the public service, and new workers are needed in that area. So
Absolutely.
um, that's kind of why I leaned into that area, instead of maybe staying with the writing or something related like communications. And it took me a long time to actually decide to finish my undergrad in that discipline, but I'm really glad I did. And so I ended up working at BCIT, so the British Columbia Institute of Technology, and I started off in the print shop on campus. So that was the first job I got. And so I had a friend who worked for the student association at BCIT, and they really just said they really like being there, and you can take part-time classes
Huh.
for free. And that just seemed interesting to me. So I got a job at the print shop, and it was like very quickly that I realized how interesting it was to work in a school environment, even at the print shop. So students would be coming all stressed out, needing to print their homework assignments off. And at BCIT, there's a lot of architectural and building science. So there's really complicated printers that print large architectural drawings, and engineering
Oh, the
stuff.
lamp stairs, those big printers.
Exactly, yes. And then also like other types of printing, like booklets and presentations and things like that. And so I'd get into these conversations with students about like what they were learning, or they would be like, "Oh no, this is wrong. This needs to change." So I'd like work with them on like how to change the settings, which really doesn't sound that exciting when I talk about it. But I really enjoyed what I was doing. And
Uh,
I at some point I think I'd been doing it for about 9 months. And then the HR manager for the student association one day kind of came by, and she was like, "Hey, Amy, I'm really surprised that you didn't apply for this position that had just come up as a program coordinator in this other department. And I was just wanted to ask you why you didn't apply for it." And I was just kind of like, why would I have applied for that job? I don't know what that job is. I don't know what skill. I don't feel like I have any of the skills you're looking for. And she was like, "But you're working really hard, and it shows that you really like the work you're doing and like working with students. So that's really the most important thing. The rest you'll learn." And she gave me 30 minutes to apply for the job.
oh, wow.
Yeah. So I got that job, and it was focusing on student clubs. So at BCIT, there are a lot of student clubs, and a lot of them are very either academically or industry focused, like marketing association or the IEEE club. So all these like engineering clubs, computing clubs, business clubs. And I absolutely loved it. Some of the students get involved in clubs, I don't know if you were a club
Big time.
participating
I was
type.
in
You
I was in both
were?
of the clubs you could be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally picture that for you. And these are some of the most engaged students you'll ever meet at a school. I remember having conversations with some of these students who are leading clubs, and I'd be like, "Are you going to class? Or you're in my office, like,
That was one of the benefits for sure.
and I'd sometimes talk to students, and they say, "I'm actually enjoying the stuff I'm doing with my club more than some of the things I'm learning in the classroom." And so I think for some students, that experience was eye-opening in terms of like their values and interests, and skills. And so it was so thrilling to see students, first of all, taking on leadership positions on campus, just out of their like voluntarily out of their own not so spare time, and creating so much value for their peers. Like some of the best events and programs at the campus were run by students, and they were so good at what they did. I learned so much from watching them, like organizing conferences, organizing competitions, hackathons, case competitions, RC car competitions, like using like Raspberry Pis or Arduinos to like do like these races and things like that. So it was so inspiring to come to work every day with these people who are so enthusiastic and engaged in like learning, creating new things, like. And so it
Totally.
really opened my eyes to this like new experience, and I just absolutely adored it. I honestly, that was is the job that made me realize that working in education and working specifically with students was a passion of mine.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say, because this is going on a long time, but the last thing that kind of happened is because the clubs worked so much with industry, I ended up partnering with the Career Center on campus quite a lot when it came to relationship management with employers. So there were a ton of clubs with these incredible like sponsorships, relationships with employers. In all different sectors. And so there were sometimes some really great opportunities to partner between the Career Center and clubs. And I think that that continues to be an area that I think is like a gold mine that a lot of schools don't necessarily tap into is like employers want to get straight to the goods. Like oftentimes they see someone like myself, an administrator, as just like a hurdle to getting to what they really want, which is the students.
Oh,
Um, and so partnering with the Career Center, some of the events just were like 10 times as good because they're driven by student needs, they're driven by student ideas, but they have some of the resources and the expertise backed by the, professional staff. And again, a job opening, there was like a 3-month opening as a career specialist. And because I had such a close relationship with the people working in the Career Center, they were like, we know you don't have a lot of experience in this area, but it's only a couple of months. You'll figure it out. And the person never came back who I was filling in for. So I applied for then. I did a good job in that period of like learning and getting into things. And I've kind of never looked back since then. It's hard to picture myself doing anything else at this point. So
wow.
long story, but that was my journey.
That is so cool to hear, Amy. I'm always glad I asked this question because I think there's so much to learn from these true stories. And I think it's extremely encouraging to hear that, you didn't necessarily have a set direction. You were kind of figuring it out as you go. And I think that's the case for a lot of job seekers. There's a ton of pressure to have that laser focused ambition on what you want to do and where you want to be. And it takes time to discover that. It kind of takes being in different environments to even know what the possibilities are. So I think super helpful to hear your story. Thank you for sharing it. Um, I know for a fact there are job seekers out there that might feel like, I don't know what I like and I don't know what I want to do. And I think your story is encouraging because it can just be a matter of, maybe you're saving up for a vacation or your first apartment or something, and you take a job. But through that, you kind of discover what you like and don't like. And just by doing good work, someone is going to notice and say, "Hey, Amy, why didn't you apply for that job or so and so? Why didn't you jump, to that position?" I think that's really cool to hear. And I think we'll have to talk about the creative writing at some point as well, because that's a passion of mine. I
Oh,
love writing, yeah, for the screen and that kind of
amazing.
stuff. I have tons of friends in the arts that do that kind of thing. And it doesn't always have to be a full-time job. It can be something you do on the side. That's really cool that you ended up, you know, learning about something you liked. And then, maybe it's still something you do part-time or in your free time. But it doesn't end up having to be the only focus you have. So I've learned a ton from what you've shared already, Amy. And I do have some questions now that, may come from the job seekers you've seen in the field today. So for people who are looking to come across opportunities, whether it's clubs, work placements, jobs, part-time or full-time, what are some of the ways that you've seen job seekers can find opportunities? Is it by just doing research? Is it by coming out to the clubs? What are some of the ways people can learn about these opportunities?
Thank you so much for asking this question. It's tough. Like my suggestion in this area is it's not an easy one. It's not like a and it's not quick and it's not kind of like a silver bullet. But it's exactly what you were just talking about, which is like being open to different experiences, but taking that leap to say like yes, I'm going to do this. I've never done this before. It's going I'm sure I will get something out of it, and at the least maybe I can contribute something. And having that mindset around engaging in opportunities and experiences, it's taking me a long time personally to get to that place. I wish I could say like I've always been this open-minded kind of growth mindset person. um And so clubs is one. We have clubs at our campus, and I think a lot of students overlook those opportunities because there's so much focus on paid professional full-time work experience as being the like holy grail of what helps people achieve career success. But there's so many other little steps. So clubs is one. One of the benefits I think of getting involved with clubs, I don't have to tell you, is you make connections and you have an opportunity to make connections in a really authentic way. So, for example, I was talking to a student in one of our clubs yesterday, and I introduced him to one of our partners who was on campus because I knew they had something in common with what the student was trying to do with their club. And that's so interesting for people to be able to hear about the things a person is getting involved in their spare time. Like, I think employers really value hearing those stories from job seekers in what they're doing in their life, whether it's reading a book, attending a conference, getting involved in the community. Like those are stories that build trust and signal, I think, a lot of the qualities that our employers are looking for. So conferences, meetups, um, hackathons, volunteering. I think, sometimes we think of volunteering as like, I'm going to go to a soup kitchen and hand out soup, which is great. Absolutely. That is a great form of volunteer work. But there's other types of volunteer work that can be a bit more skilled or targeted. So, we were talking about IEEE. There's IEEE Vancouver. They hold events. They have volunteer positions. And for sure, if you're a person who's looking to become a software developer, it's hard to make that connection of like, how is me, greeting conference attendees at an event? Where's the connection there, right? Of like, how is that helping me practice my coding skills, or how is that making me more attractive to Amazon or something like that? So it's hard because I think it's hard for people to see the immediate connection or that really quick payoff. But by doing those things, first of all, you become a more interesting person. You have more to talk about. You learn from the people you meet and engage with. You gain confidence. You learn how to talk to different types of people. And so, for sure, that experience may not directly translate into a job offer. Someone might not walk in and say, like, I like the cut of your jibs, here's a job for you. But things like that kind of put together that puzzle. So hopefully I'm not leaving out any ideas here, but like volunteering, skilled volunteering, like targeted volunteering, clubs, meetups, conferences.
Those are great starting points. And I think just the approach you're recommending here is really um, tangible again and exciting because, I was part of a lot of clubs kind of growing up, and I did the whole student council thing. So I was the president of student council. I did the whole
I
campaign and everything, but I did it because it looked like the people before me were having a ton of fun. I didn't apply for that club because I was more like you. I didn't really have, a university plan in mind. I was just having a good time, and those people looked like they were having such a good time. They were organizing the spirit days. They were great friends. And I was like, I just want to be part of that. And so I think you're just reminding us here that, apply for the club that maybe you're just gonna have a good time with. You get to do that thing you're interested in, whether it's IEEE, you know, something marketing based. It could be anything. It could be based on any skill you're interested in. And then, yeah, you're right. I think that's where you meet the people that are like-minded, that might have opportunities they can offer you. And it doesn't necessarily have to come from a super targeted place. It can just be that you enjoy being there, and you never know what can come from that. The conferences are as well. Those can be awkward networking opportunities, but you just never know who's there. I've been to many of those where you bump into someone who works at Amazon or has a, daughter-in-law that works at Amazon, and you make a new friend that can lead to an interesting opportunity. So I think those are great starting points, Amy. Now let's
am
say,
glad you're helpful.
oh, big time. Now you mentioned something interesting in the print shop where you had that 30-minute window to apply for the position. Did that include an interview, or how did that work?
No, just submitting the application
Oh,
itself. Um, I worked at a computer kind of somewhat in that job. So I could just went to my whatever it was, Google Drive or something, and just grabbed my resume and like made some quick edits. And and submitted it. So it may not have been the greatest application I've ever submitted, but I think when you have someone who knows you already, the resume doesn't have to do as much heavy lifting. So I had that advantage.
Well, even then, you're talking about you made some quick edits. I think one thing that's frustrating for job seekers is they send that same resume to 1,000 job postings without making those small edits, and you already had the in and still customized it. So that's one thing that I hear makes a huge difference. Um, do you have any tips around that? How to get your resume to stand out when job seekers today might be applying for positions?
I do. I have this conversation on a daily basis. It's one of my most and least favorite topics, resumes, because on the one hand, I think resumes and applications in general are becoming increasingly challenging for both job seekers and employers. You've got applicant tracking systems. And now the job seekers have some of the tools that employers have had the luxury of using. And so I do think we're going to increasingly get to a point where we've got two robots talking to each other,
I agree.
um, which, I don't know where that will go. But so yeah, the customization piece, especially in a market like this where there's a large volume of applicants, a really great candidate. Yesterday I talked to a student who had a recommendation for a large tech company and he'd spent time on his resume, but he didn't get an interview and he was really disappointed. So the next step that we're going to do is take a look at his application and the job posting just to see how customized was it really.
Okay.
Sometimes you can't control that, the fact that there's 10 other applicants who just like had, you can't make up the skills you have and the experience you have, but how well did you represent your skills and experience? And 9 times out of 10, when I look at an application, it's really not customized. um, the first layer of customization that I recommend is to look at when you look at the job posting, is to look at the qualifications or requirements section of the job posting. The whole job posting is important, but that requirements or qualifications section is really where the most keywords are, because that's their wish list. And then seeing how those words are appearing in your resume, because it's not just about, when we think about keyword searches for applicant tracking systems, it's the same way a human being's works. When a recruiter's looking at a resume, they're looking for those keywords, but it's also about where the keywords appear and the context around them. So if someone's looking for a backend developer and they've got, let's say, Java as like one of their main programming languages, yes, have that Java word in your technical skills list, and maybe make sure it's toward the top of your list. Maybe make sure you've got your some relevant frameworks or other pieces that relate to Java, maybe some like testing frameworks that relate to Java. But where else is that appearing in your resume? If you don't have work experience, is it in your course? Is it in your key courses? Is it in your projects? So a lot of times students don't realize that if Java is the top thing an employer is looking for, just seeing it in a skills list doesn't tell them any context about how well you know that skill. So having it in a project, having used it in a hackathon, wherever you can help give more context to how you know Java, like repetition and context can help build the case of like, how well does this person really have this skill? And then the second thing is like, a lot of people ask me, well, I don't know this thing that well, right? So maybe one of the skills an employer is looking for is like familiarity with Linux. Sorry, I'm using all tech examples because that's okay. So the employer might say like familiarity with Linux, and then I'll tell a person like, oh, you haven't listed Linux here. Do you have any experience? And they'll say something like, well, I've just fooled around with it a little bit at home. And I'll say, okay, but they said, like, pay attention to the word. It said familiarity with Linux. Like, what does familiarity mean to you? And they'll be like, well, maybe this. And then they'll say, but like, what if that's not what they mean? And my advice in those cases, like, unless you're blatantly misrepresenting yourself, it's up to the employer to do, and I'd love to hear whether you agree or disagree on this, but it's up to the employer to investigate, right? If you say, if you put maybe Linux in your technical skills, you might be kind of insinuating you have a firm grasp of it, but maybe if you have it in your key courses only, you're signaling that you've touched on it. If you don't have it in any of your projects, and it's just a key course, that would tell me if I was an employer, this person maybe has a little bit of knowledge, but then you could in your cover letter add more context to some of the things you've done. You might choose to add a personal project where you've deployed something in Linux. Actually, I don't know if that's the right way to say that, but maybe you want to talk a little bit about what you've done in Linux. So people leave things out because they're worried, but then they're eliminating themselves without even giving the employer a chance to reject them. So I think it's about how that keyword is appearing, where you're looking for the keywords in the job posting, and then making sure that you're being generous to yourself without, I always say, like, as long as you can explain in an interview and you doesn't look like you are having to backpedal on what you said. If you're like, yeah, I mentioned in my courses here, it's been a couple of years, but I've been brushing up. Like, if as long as you can explain in an interview and you're comfortable with that, then I think go for it.
I definitely agree with that, and it's funny you mention it because when we put out job postings, specifically put that we're interested in passion projects you've done, almost more so than course related experience or work experience, and that's kind of case by case. But if you've done something because you're interested in it and you've done it on your own time, that indicates a certain level of interest in that, whether it's, use making your own software or games or just running your own system. Those are the kind of things that our team wants to know about. So I agree. I think people miss the chance to share some of these passion projects, not realizing that they're interesting to hear about. So definitely, I agree with that. And I think it's a really helpful reminder to folks to, hey, put those things. And if it's something that's going to spark an interesting conversation in the interview, then yeah, as long as you have a story to share about it, it's well worth having there. So appreciate that reminder as well, Amy. And I know we're coming up on the end of the time we had booked with you today. So I think we'll have to have you back on here because we just got started and we're already at the end here. But thank you so much for making some time to share these insights today, for sharing your story as well. I really hope we can get you back on and ask you more questions. But do you have any sort of kind of final thoughts for today around just career advice, guidance for job seekers that you want to leave us with before we close off?
Yeah, oh, I always have. As you may have noticed by now, I have a lot to say at all times about everything. Um, I think my my best advice right now is learning how to embrace uncertainty in your career, which is so hard. It's so uncomfortable. I'm not really great at it either, but people are really, I think I notice a lot of people increasingly and understandably with things like cost of living and challenges going on in the world, people are looking for certainty and they're looking for guarantees. So a lot of times when I'm talking to people about career exploration, they're looking for security, but also, high income and growth potential. And we want it all, right? And I think that's understandable. But there's going to be uncertainty in your career almost guaranteed, and so how can you embrace that and then learn to be able to adapt to the opportunities that do come up, or have that growth mindset? Not my favorite term, it's a little buzzwordy, but being open-minded. And so, I make a lot of suggestions to people where I can see it's not hitting that, like, I've got the solution to your problem kind of thing, where it's like, I'm asking you to go out and spend your time and energy trying things out that may not have an immediate payoff. Like, you might go to a meetup or a conference, find it really uncomfortable, and not meet anyone that can do anything for you. So not everything you try or do is necessarily going to have a big payoff. But almost certainly you'll learn something about, okay, this type of event's not for me. I know that now. I'm going to try something different. Or I noticed I feel really uncomfortable in networking situations. What can I do to get support with that? Can I get a friend to go with me? Can I try a different type of event that has more structure where I feel less nervous? But I think just embracing that uncertainty, realizing it's going to be uncomfortable, job search, we don't talk enough about it. It's a horrible mental health drain. I think I've had so many people, at some of the hardest parts of their life during job search, and it's tied to so much confidence, family, finance, mental health, all kinds of things. And so it is hard. It's not easy. The people who look successful or look like they have it all figured out, they have hit some serious rock bottoms in their careers. And people are willing to talk about those things and talk about how they've moved through uncertainty or challenges. So I think just embracing that uncertainty and that the vulnerability that comes with that is some advice I'd like to share.
Yeah, I think that's extremely empowering, Amy, and I do think that it's not something that there is an answer for. And I get asked that question all the time too. What should I say when they ask me XYZ, tell me about yourself? And I have to say, I can't tell you what to say about yourself either. But I do think it comes from hearing that, yeah, people have, there are ways to deal with the uncertainty. And so again, I really appreciate you sharing the uncertainty that's been part of your journey. I think that's something that, again, is encouraging. There's a way to get through it, and there's a lot of excitement that comes in that period of time as well. So, again, thank you so much for spending some time with me today, sharing these stories. Um, Truly hope to have you back on in the future, and hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, Imran. It was a pleasure. I'll come back anytime.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk to you soon then, Amy. Have a good one.
Okay. You too. Bye.
Bye.